Hello and welcome back to the Linux Panic YouTube channel. In this video we're going to be looking at how to customize an Ubuntu server ISO using the custom Ubuntu ISO creator, or Cubic, made by one Mr. PJ Singh on GitHub. I'll link the GitHub in the description below. But first, thank you very much for watching and choosing this video as your video of choice. So let's begin, shall we? So what you'll need is you will need to make sure your system's still working. I'll explain my issues as we go. So we've got our ISO. I'm using Ubuntu 20.04.5 long-term support in the 64-bit flavor. As we can see here, I have Ubuntu 22.04.1 live server, so this is the most up-to-date version of Ubuntu server. So the first thing we want to do is, after we've installed any Cubic, after we've installed Cubic, which we can do by looking at the GitHub listed by Mr. PJ Singh. It includes a list of instructions, to which I will leave a link again to in the description. But it's just all you need to do is enable the universe repository, universe repositories, and then get access to the, then enable the PPA for Cubic Wizard and the release, and then install it. But again, I'll leave a link to the description to Mr. Singh's GitHub repository. So once we've installed this and we have once we have Cubic installed, we want to select there, go to our downloads, and in this case I'm going to use this as my project, and we will go with Linux Panic Ubuntu server. Select this as my project directory, so anything we do will be done there. We want to go forward and select our ISO, so in this case it is Ubuntu server 22.04.1 live server. We're going to call this version 1. Version 1, there we go. I'm going to call this Linux Panic Ubuntu server V1. And of course, Linux Panic Ubuntu server. And of course, we have to do the obligatory youtube.com/u/Linux Panic, or just Linux Panic. So after you can change all the information that's here that is not in a grayed out box. You can change this whatever you want. Once we've done that, we want to do next, and what this is going to do is just kind of have a look to see what version you are using. There is a different version that is compatible with older versions of Ubuntu. Anything older than 18.04.5 Bionic has a different variation that will work. It's just you need to pay attention to what version of Ubuntu you have so you know which one to use. As you can see here, we are currently sat here in our Cubic, in our virtual environment, so we can do a few things like updating. So to do that is we do apt-update and then apt-upgrade. So what this will do is it'll install any updates to the server packages, and then it'll also do upgrades. Now with this we can do a lot more than just updating and upgrading. For example, if you're working in a server setting, trust me, my internet's not this slow, it's just this package I found whilst also updating this system earlier. Anyway, if you're in a server setting and you want to set up a server ISO with a certain amount of settings straight from the get-go, for example SSH keys, and you need to have some sort of network access method that isn't your standard way of doing things, and you have a certain way of doing things, you could do that with this and edit all the files you need to before you deploy. You could install software before you deploy. That's why this bit of software is actually what is very good, because I came across this as I was also looking into making my own Linux operating system with my Linux from Scratch series. But this is a wonderful tool, and honestly, Mr. PJ Singh deserves all the love, really, because it is a really wonderful tool. I would also like to say hello, Mr. PJ Singh. Thank you very much for commenting on the first video. That genuinely made my day. So, whilst we wait, I'm just going to have a sip of my coffee. And I'll explain the issues that I had. See, the issues that I had is not with the software at all. I realised I had made a mistake whilst recording the first time around because I was preparing the video for upload. You know, go through my video once, watch it, make sure there's nothing wrong. I'd made a mistake. Went to go back to re-record, and the virtual machine I was using with Virt Manager said nope. Virt Manager didn't want to know. Wouldn't let me boot it, but it would let me boot the virtual machines that were on the host drive, on the main drive of my Manjaro system. Tried to do a virtual drive on the Manjaro system. That didn't want to work. Virt Manager just wasn't knowing at all. VMware wouldn't do because it was having kernel header issues, and I still need to try and get that figured out because I'm using kernel version 6. And VMware was the same thing with VMware and VirtualBox with kernel header issues. So I decided to do a reboot of Manjaro, and now I'm in Windows because Manjaro won't boot, so I need to figure out why that is. But that's for another time. So now that we have installed our updates and upgraded, we are ready to do other things. So for example, we can go through and start adding the bits of software that we may need. So we can do apt install vim, not bim, vim. Imagine if there had been a package named bim. That would ultimately screw with a lot of people if there was a package named bim, because how easy is it to go from BV on a English US / UK / whatever other English variation there is. English QWERTY variation. So now that we've installed bim, we want to go apt install neofetch. See, sometimes neofetch does play nice, sometimes neofetch doesn't, because of how long it's been since neofetch has actually been updated. The last time neofetch was updated was a year ago. But as we all know, neofetch still works perfectly fine with no issues at all, which is very much a surprise. So of course, we wait for neofetch to install. There are other versions of neofetch. There's one called pfetch, which is a much cut down version of neofetch, actually developed by the same person, which is pretty cool. Now we've installed neofetch. Let's say, oh, you need a firewall of some sort. So to do that, we just do apt install UFW as my firewall of choice, and the one I have used in the past. It's a good firewall. It does the job. Just no bothers at all. So we want to do apt install git. Yes. Give this a second. So once that's done, I'll then just do a couple changes. For example, if I do vim.bashrc and just have a look at my bashrc file, scroll all the way down to the bottom, do insert, and then just do neofetch. So I'm going to do Control-C, right quit. So what I'll do is I'll run neofetch at the launching of a terminal window. So for example, whenever you log in, you'll just go neofetch because it's running the bashrc. But now we've installed some basic stuff where we can have a look at what is available to us. So we have our vim info, we have our bashrc. So let's look in our vim info. So we'll do .vim info. Yes, I know I'm using nano this time around. As we can see, nano's not installed with this book because we need to use vim. so it's worth actually seeing what's there. But this is all of our Vim info. This is just it. So I want to do Control C and get out of here, QA, and we can go further. So we want to do cd dot dot. We got our directory, so this is what's here now. We can make changes to this if we wanted to. So, for example, let's go into var and have a look. We've got all of this. So there's a lot you can do that I'm not going to mess around with too much because I don't want to break the ISO. But I will go a bit deeper. So I want to do cd dot dot lsla, make sure I'm in the right place. And let's just do cd into user. Again, good old lsla. Shows off more that's there. You got your usual games and all the stuff that comes with the operating system standard. That's all there. It's all going to work. So once we've decided that we've installed everything that we want to install, this is the point where we can move forward. But I will install one final thing. I will do apt install speed test CLI. Wait for that to finish. And now that it's done, is fail to front end. This is expected because this is it is expecting a response from the operating system in terms of networking, because like it's just general call and answer response. But because this is inside a contained system, it's inside a container basically. It's asking for a host system to respond, and there is no host system to respond. So this is going, I have an error. But if we, for example, look at Vim, we have Vim. If we do ufw version, we have ufw. So the things that we have installed are still there, even though it did chuck an error. And also, if you look, Canonical has yet to update the copyright notice on UFW or Ubuntu Firewall. And bearing in mind, we're now in October 29th of 2022. At this point, if they were updated it, they may as well, if they're going to update this copyright notice, they may as well wait until next year. But it also shows how long since it was last updated. Anyway, we've done all of this. Now it's time for us to move on. So we'll click next, and this is just going to go. This is just going to go through the various processes, identify boot kernels, packages we've installed. We can create all of these. It just sets us up. So this is the kernel version that we're using. There's nothing additional that's popped up, so we don't need to do anything more. And this is our compression. So this is how long it's gonna take for us, and what form of compression we're using. Because I need to get this video uploaded and to save time, I'm going to do this in the LZ4 compression instead of the usual gzip or Z standard or LZMA or ZXZ. I know from compiling Linux from scratch that Z standard and XW or XZ are just a little bit of a pain in the rear end. So whilst we wait for this to finish, we are going to have a sip of our coffee. This time they took 1.66 gigabytes. That's not gigabytes, it's a gibby because there's an I there. And everything is ready. We can't test this because there's nowhere for it to install. So let's just have a sip of our coffee. And if we go to Linux Ubuntu Server, here we have our ISO that has been changed. See, as that comes out to 1.8 gigabytes. But if we remember correctly, they had that amount of many bytes because there's a 7 there. I remember that. That works fine, and that's what we just have. The time now does not match real time because my time is 5:19, but 2:19. That is what we wanted. So this is good. So I will return as I am booting up and installing our our Ubuntu Server ISO. Okay, now that we have got our ISO ready, all we need to do is just power on the virtual machine and hope for the best. This took a little bit longer than I thought it would because I didn't want to have to upload it to the internet and then pull it back down again. So I spent some spent a little bit of time messing around with server software and FileZilla server. Now I need to take another sip of my coffee and hope and pray this worked. So Ubuntu server does yeah, it does this. Where it just goes, hello, I don't know what's going on, don't know, that's fine. So this is now changed from the font it was on to the Ubuntu fonts. This gets used quite a lot. As you may or may not have seen, there was a little bit there where it said LPBS, which means that this has worked as was intended. So we just got to wait for it to do its usual thing, which is going through, starting all the servers as is expected for this to do on its first time round. But as we can see here, Ubuntu 22.04.1 long-term support LPBS V1 TTY1. So that means this has worked. I do know that the creator PJ Singh did say there was some issues that he was having getting this to work with Ubuntu server, but as we can see, this is working, and I honestly, this is an amazing piece of software. So I cannot give more kudos to the man. So what we want to do is select English, go through, just say yes to everything. Yes, yes, yes. Yes, do whatever you want with my operating system. This is the only virtual machine that's going to get removed after the fact. Yes, yes, I'm sure I want to continue. Ubuntu, 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 Ubuntu. No, I don't want SSH server, just carry on. And we're done. All we've got to do now is wait for this to finish installing. Which again, shouldn't take too long, because it is a local disk, a local ISO, and it should just blow through without any problems at all. So it's just doing the usual, we'll get the rest of the things it needs to do, and start. And as we can see here, it's just gonna install the kernel, which shouldn't take too long because this is only 1.8 gigabytes worth of ISO compared to Ubuntu Live Desktop, which is 3.8 gigabytes of ISO. So if you want to install this on a USB stick of some sort, I personally would recommend at least a USB 3.0. 3.0, what is it? 3.1 Gen 1, 10 gigabits now. Like, the USB IF needs to make up the mind, but at least use at least an 8 gigabyte USB stick, or 8 gigabyte storage medium of some sort when it comes to installing this. As we can see here, it's just doing what it needs to do. It's pulling down 239 megabytes worth of firmware. So I'm going to stop the recording whilst we wait for this to finish. It's time for another sip of coffee. So now that we've installed the server for the second time around, as we can see, when inputting the correct password and username combination, there are a few issues. It does not play well. So at the current moment, this is not possible. PJ Singh was right that this is not possible. You can make all your changes, it will install correctly, but this will not let you log in for whatever reason is going on. This appears to be an issue with Ubuntu Server and Ubuntu Server only. Now what I can do is I can go back and install another operating system that I did earlier, but I don't know if that safely was safely moved because of the issues I've been having. So this is the point where we call the video. As we know, this does work and has installed. It's just an issue with Ubuntu server, and there's not much that can be done until a reason gets found out, as I'm sure Mr. PJ Singh will update us all on his GitHub in an issue, in an issue or an FAQ, or maybe even this video. But I would like to thank you very much for watching. I would like to thank Mr. PJ Singh for commenting on the video on the first video talking about this, and I was saying how good my video was, so I cannot thank you enough. I would like to thank, I'm sorry I'm going to butcher your name here most likely, Mr. Mohan Preet Singh Virk, for commenting, saying, can we respin custom Ubuntu distro based on Ubuntu Server? So I'd like to thank you very much for your comment about this. And I'd like to thank you very much for watching. If you are not already subscribed, maybe consider subscribing. If you liked the video, hit the like button. If you dislike the video, hit the dislike. YouTube only shows half of them, but I see 100% of them. Anyway, to whoever's left watching, thank you very much. And I hope you have a good rest of your day. Goodbye. If you're still watching, I'm trying to reach 500 subscribers before November the 5th, because that is the 1 year, or November the 3rd, and that's because it's the 1 year anniversary of Linux Panic. Anyway, have a good one. Thank you. Go sip some coffee. Sip some coffee. Goodbye.